Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. This is episode number 43. We are on the second chapter of part 1, the Yoga of Divine Works. This chapter is called Self-Consecration. And we are starting with paragraph number 6. And those who are not familiar, in the description you will find the link to this chapter. And please follow the text as we are reading and exploring what rich content Sri Aurobindo is sharing with us. So let's dive straight into the book. And since yoga is in its essence a turning away from the ordinary material and animal life led by most men, or from the more mental and still limited way of living followed by the few, to a greater spiritual life, to the way divine, every part of our energies that is given to the lower existence in the spirit of that existence is a contradiction of our aim and our self-dedication. So there are two groups Sri Aurobindo is bringing in here. Most people live at a material and animal life. The basic necessities, the survival level of eating, mating, sleeping, and doing work just enough to keep this going. That is what he is referring to as the material animal life led by most people. Then there is a smaller group, more mental but still limited way of living, followed by the few. Mental life. As the mental development picks up, mind brings that will to progress, sense of progress, keeping up with change, and exploring new domains. And mind also brings its cultural, aesthetic developments. So that is followed by a relatively smaller section compared to the general mass that lives like an animal. So that's the second group, those who are living a mental life, from the more mental but still limited way of living, followed by the few. Both of these are there, but what we are looking at is a turning away from both these to a higher range, to a greater spiritual life, to the way divine. Every part of our energies. So if we are to do that, then this is the requirement. Every part of our energies that is given to the lower existence, in the spirit of that existence, is a contradiction of our aim and our self-dedication. Lower existence. We have our whole evolutionary past where we saw these two groups of life that is possible. A very basic survival level existence, pretty much like an animal, or a bit more civilized, sophisticated, mentalized life. Both these, compared to the spiritual possibility, we can consider to be a lower possibility. And our daily life energies goes in supporting this lower traditional past evolutionary energies and its formations and its needs. So we need to take that investment into this lower nature, turn it towards the higher possibility. Let me read this line again. And since yoga is in its essence a turning away from the ordinary material and animal life led by most men, or from the more mental and but still limited way of living followed by the few, to a greater spiritual life, to the way divine, every part of our energies that is given to the lower existence in the spirit of that existence is a contradiction of our aim and our self-dedication. So it becomes a contradiction when we have a higher aim. If you don't have a higher aim, no issues. When there is a higher aim, these things become a contradiction. The energies that is given to the lower existence, in the spirit of that existence, the way that life want to live, in that spirit, when we give that energy to it, that will become a contradiction. Whereas if we bring in the higher impulsion into it, a spiritual impulsion, then giving energy into that, that will be a different game. Whereas following the spirit of the lower existence for its own sake, that is what will make it a contradiction of our aim and our self-dedication. In our previous episode, we saw that a complete self-consecration is required for this big shift that we are looking at. On the other hand, every energy or activity that we can convert from its allegiance to the lower and dedicate to the service of the higher is so much gained on our road, so much taken from the powers that oppose our progress. So our current energies are getting invested in the past ways of being. And that we need to now learn to take up and redirect it towards the higher possibility. Now, that when we turn it around to a higher possibility, then what is there as the lower existence, which was getting fed by our energies, our supply of our attention and our enjoyment of that way of living, and the powers behind it, they will turn out to be our opposition on the path. And there are powers that oppose. Here, these powers are not just our individual habits. These habits are part of much larger collective habits and universal habits. And these powers of the lower physical, vital, mental habits, they stand on the way, and these powers oppose because they had been receiving the support of continuing the old way. Now, if we are to take the energy out and redirect it towards something higher, that is when the opposition shows up. So, on the other hand, every energy or activity that we can convert from its allegiance to the lower, there is currently these energies are in allegiance to the lower and dedicate to the service of the higher, is so much gained on our road, so much taken from the powers that oppose our progress. Every energy has to be taken back and put it for the higher purpose. It is the difficulty of this wholesale conversion that is the source of all the stumblings in the path of yoga. So it is not easy to make that transition, to stop investing in the old ways and take that and put it into a higher way of being. That's not easy. There is a, like if we think in terms of a wholesale conversion in one go, very difficult. And because it is difficult as a whole, there is a whole complex work to be done in terms of turning one by one towards a higher possibility. And that's the reason why there is a whole lot of stumbling that happens on the way. Because we may take one part, convert it, but then the others pull. In fact, they may revolt and pull everything back. So all that happens in the journey of transformation. So it is the difficulty of this wholesale conversion that is the source of all the stumblings in the path of yoga. For our entire nature and its environment, all our personal and all our universal self, personal and universal self, are full of habits and influences that are opposed to our spiritual rebirth and work against the wholeheartedness of our endeavor. So, our entire nature and its environment. One is our personal, psychological, physical nature. Then it has its environment. There is a social context, and there is also material nature's context. And we are part of it. We are woven into it, and it is out of its materials, out of its physical material, vital material, mental material, our individual construction is made. And it has its allegiance to the existing order. And it is not only our personal but also universal self. Our body is part of the universal matter. Our mind is part of the universal mind. Our vital is part of the universal vital. So, all our personal and all our universal self are full of habits and influences. So, it's not just opening to the universal self, because universal self exists in all the levels. There is a physical universal, vital universal, mental universal, and all of them have their corresponding habits, and that holds the individual back. We are looking at ranges that are beyond the mind, the divine range that is above. That is where we are trying to go, not just universalizing us as it is. That won't change much because we will be still the mental beings, but more universalized. That is not what we are looking at, going beyond the mind to some higher divine range. But in that, all our personal and our universal self are full of habits and influences that are opposed to our spiritual rebirth. So, in this universal nature, physical, vital, mental nature, there are habits, and they oppose this spiritual rebirth and work against the wholeheartedness of our endeavor. Wholeheartedness. For us to put ourselves entirely for this task, it will become difficult because of this opposition at an individual, collective, and universal level. In a certain sense, we are nothing but a complex mass of mental, nervous, and physical habits, held together by a few ruling ideas, desires, and associations. An amalgam of many small self-repeating forces with a few major variations. That's our normal, unregenerated condition, normal existence. We are nothing but a complex mass of mental, nervous, and physical habits. Mental, nervous, and physical habits held together by a few ruling ideas, desires, and associations. Ideas, desires, and associations. That gets recycled again and again and again and again. We have few ideas that we hold on to that become our core. And similarly, few repeating desires and associations. At internally subjective psychological level as well as on a collective level, there is a existing pattern and template into which we fit into and continue our existence within that. An amalgam of many small self-repeating forces. They go on repeating. If we look back our life, week after week, we see that we are repeating things again and again and again and again. Physical habits, vital habits, mental habits, emotional habits, intellectual habits. All that are just going on and on and on, repeating, perpetuating what is currently well formed. Few major vibrations. That is, they're all like a state of vibration. It has its own frequency and it perpetuates continuously. What we propose in our yoga is nothing less than to break up the whole formation of our past and present, which makes up the ordinary material and mental man, and to create a new center of vision and a new universe of activities in ourselves, which shall constitute a divine humanity or a superhuman nature. So we have to actually break the old formations, the formations of the past and present. And this past is not just 1 or 2 years, it goes all the way into the collective past. Whole life of humanity is all there within us. And that has to be broken. And in its place, we have to bring a new center of vision. New center of vision. Our current center of vision is in the mental being. And that has its ruling ideas, existing patterns of thought, emotions, in which we have settled groove going round and round and round. So from there, we need to create a new center of vision and a new universe of activities. New universe of activities. Universe of a higher existence and its corresponding activities in ourselves, which shall constitute a divine humanity and a superhuman nature. There is human nature and there is a superhuman nature. There is nature and super nature. There is ordinary nature and there is a divine nature. That transition we have to make. So what we propose in our yoga is nothing less than to break up the whole formation of our past and present, which makes up the ordinary material and mental man, and to create a new center of vision and a new universe of activities in ourselves, which shall constitute a divine humanity or a superhuman nature. The first necessity is to dissolve that central faith and vision in the mind, which concentrates it on its development and satisfaction and interest in the old externalized order of things. So that's the first necessity. We need to dissolve the central faith and vision. So our existing current automated habitual life has its vision and faith that this is the nature of reality and this is the purpose of life. This is how to live a healthy, purposeful life. And it has its limited notion, a vision of it, and a faith in it. This has to be dissolved. That existing faith and vision that holds everything in place. A life that is turned towards our world of objects and tied to it, bound to it, and unable to unplug and see anything that is beyond. It is hypnotized by the material world and its glitter and the glory, and it is absorbed in it, and it believes in it. It is going with that nature and what has been taught to us. This is what life is, and this is how you live life, and this is the nature of reality, all that. We live accordingly, and that existing faith has to be dissolved. So the first necessity is to dissolve that central faith and vision in the mind, which concentrate it on its development and satisfaction and interest. So there is a development and satisfaction of interest in the old externalized order of things. So this particular faith and vision develops in its current grooves, which are to be unplugged, dissolved in the old externalized order. It is externalized. Our energies, our consciousness is practically externalized, plugged into the external media, external activities, external marketplace, external field of work. That's where the entire energy gets plugged in, absorbed, and lost. So from there, it has to be unplugged. So it is imperative to change this surface orientation. It is also a surface orientation. We live in the surface. We have a deeper level, but we don't live in that depth. We live on the surface. And it sees the surface of things, and that is why it has a surface orientation. For the deeper faith and vision, which we see only the divine and seek only after the divine. So we have to, it is imperative to exchange this surface orientation for the deeper faith and vision. There is a deeper faith and vision. What does it imply? Deeper faith and vision, it sees only the divine and seek only after the divine. Straight. Single pointed focus. There is the divine, who is the source of all perfection, all beauty, all delight, all consciousness. That is the focus. Consistently, persistently, that has to become the focus. So it is imperative to exchange this surface orientation for the deeper faith and vision, which see only the divine and seek only after the divine. The next need is to compel all our lower being to pay homage to this new faith and greater vision. Our lower being, with all its activities turned outward and with its existing habits, they are to be compelled to pay homage to this new vision, new faith, new possibility. First is to dissolve the central faith and vision of this lower nature, its immersion, and then turn all that lower nature and its part to pay homage to the newly forming higher nature, where entire focus is on the divine. So the next need is to compel all our lower being to pay homage to this new faith and greater vision. All our nature must make an integral surrender, not a partial surrender, integral. Every part must surrender as a whole. All our nature must make an integral surrender. It must offer itself in every part and every movement, to that which seems to the unregenerated sense mind so much less real than the material world and its objects. So our unregenerated sense mind is our cognitive faculty in its very basic stage. Senses tied to the external world, the material objects, and that experience is what is real. That is concrete. Material world is so real, so measurable. It has its weight, it has its mass, everything is measurable. It's an objective world. And that is what is real to our sense mind. Whereas this new orientation, when the very word divine remains abstract, what does it mean in experience? This remains relatively unreal compared to our external life and its demands and its pressures and its drama and its adventures. Whereas this inner one is still vague. It is less real compared to the material. So that's one of our big challenge. So all our nature must make an integral surrender. It must offer itself in every part and every movement to that which seems to the unregenerated sense mind so much less real than the material world and its objects. Our whole being, soul, mind, sense, heart, will, life, body, must consecrate all its energies so entirely and in such a way that it shall become a fit vehicle for the divine. So our entire instrumental nature must become a fit vehicle. And what are these layers? Body, life, will, heart, sense, mind, soul is the one who is using all these instruments. And all of them need to become the willing servitors of this higher possibility. But at present, these instruments serve the lower nature and its existing needs. Our whole being, soul, mind, sense, heart, will, life, body, must consecrate all its energies so entirely and in such a way that it shall become a fit vehicle for the divine. That's what happens. We become the fit vehicles. This is no easy task, for everything in the world follows the fixed habit which is to it a law and resists a radical change. All that exists in the world follows its law and resists any type of radical change we try to bring in, because it had been functioning in certain way habitually, and it will persist and insist on continuing that old groove, and easily it won't give up. It requires substantial persuasion. So this is no easy task, for everything in the world everything in the world follows the fixed habit which is to it a law and resists a radical change. And no change can be more radical than the revolution attempted in the integral yoga. Revolution attempted in the integral yoga. Integral yoga is revolutionary. It is not about liberation, but there is a revolution that is looked at. Unprecedented revolution of embracing this entire complexity and bringing the necessary transformation and the mutation of our being, which is never attempted. So no change can be more radical than the revolution attempted in the integral yoga. Everything in us has constantly to be called back to the central faith and will and vision. Central faith, will, and vision. A vision that sees the divine in all things. A will that sees this is the only thing, central thing to do. A faith, an unshakable faith. This is it. This is the purpose of life. So that's where we have to call back all the energies that habitually goes out in the conventional old way, pull them back and say, this is a new vision, new faith, new will, towards which we need your allegiance. So, and no change can be more radical than the revolution attempted by the integral yoga. Everything in us has constantly to be called back to the central faith and will and action. Every thought and impulse has to be reminded in the language of the Upanishad that that is the divine Brahman and not this which man here adores. So every thought and impulse, we generally are moved by impulses or thought perceptions. Thoughts come, we get some suggestion, and there is an impulsion to act. So every thought and impulse must be reminded, as in the language of the Upanishad, that that is the divine Brahman and not this which men here adore. Our mundane normal life, what people would adore, consider as an ideal, That's not what we would pursue. We will pursue something subtler, deeper. That which is the divine Brahman. And this transition requires a constant reminder because our existing energies, habits, thoughts, impulses, they keep going outward into the grooves of the conventional life. Every vital fiber has to be persuaded to accept the entire renunciation of all that hitherto represented to it its own existence. The vital fiber, our vital life energy and its very fiber of its existence, has to be persuaded to accept the entire renunciation because it gets attached to its current formations and life patterns. So accept an entire renunciation of all that hitherto represented to it its own existence. So what it considers as life, way of being, all that it has to renounce, that has to be trained, that has to be brought in. Mind has to cease to be mind and become brilliant with something beyond it. So our existing mind, with its sluggish thought, with its analytical thinking, limited rational intelligence capacity, all that has to be replaced by something that is brilliant and beyond itself. So mind can become brilliant. And that's one of the developments of yoga. As the mind undergoes transformation, it becomes increasingly illumined and brilliant. Life has to change into a thing vast and calm, and intense and powerful, that can no longer recognize its old, blind, eager, narrow self of petty impulse and desire. Our current life energy in the body, it is very fickle, it's very reactive, impulsive, that goes after all kinds of impulse and petty impulse and desires. This has to change into something vast and calm, and yet passionate and intense. So combining a passionate intensity with a vaster calmness, that is the kind of development we are looking at. In comparison, our existing one is very shallow, impulsive, limited. So life has to change into a thing vast and calm and intense and powerful, that can no longer recognize its old, blind, eager, narrow self. Old, blind, eager, narrow self of petty impulses and desires. So we need to give up all that. Even the body has to submit to a mutation and be no longer the clamorous animal or the impeding clod it now is, but become instead a conscious servant and radiant instrument and living form of the spirit. The body is like a lump of clay, a clod which resists change. It is tamasic, inert, habitual. It has to change. It has to undergo a mutation. Very material substance, itself has to undergo change, a mutation. Even the body has to submit to a mutation and be no longer the clamorous animal. Clamorous animal. Our animal nature is clamorous. It wants its hungers and impulses and drives, compulsions, all that. Pretty much that animal drive. It clamors. Or the impeding clod now it is. That lump of clay that blocks all the progress, inert. Instead, become a conscious servant and radiant instrument. Conscious servant. You're conscious of the divine will, a divine force, and you are a conscious servant of that and a radiant instrument. radiant. Energy has to radiate. The light has to radiate from within. And that's a possibility. And living form of the spirit. A living form of the spirit. That is what the body needs to become. The difficulty of the task has led, naturally, to the pursuit of easy and transient solutions. It has generated and fixed deeply the tendency of religions and of schools of yoga to separate the life of the world from inner life. The transient solutions. Since it is difficult to change our outward going life, which is woven into the collective life and tied to it, attached to it, it is difficult to change. Therefore, the religions and schools of yoga came and created a primary division. There is inner life and there is outer life. These are not meeting. They are to be clearly separated. That's how that transient solution, trench, it creates a trench and transient solution, which is narrow and separative solution, which we need to look at. So the difficulty of the task has led naturally to the pursuit of easy and transient solution. It has generated and fixed deeply. There is a already deeply settled vision and faith in the yogic schools of India. This deep separation between the inner and the outer. To separate life of the world from the inner life. It has generated and fixed deeply the tendency of religions and of schools of yoga to separate the life of the world from the inner life. The powers of this world and their actual activities, it is felt, either do not belong to God at all or are some obscure and puzzling cause, Maya, or another, a dark contradiction of the divine truth. So the whole notion of Maya, or a distortion, a dark contradiction of the divine truth, the whole notion of the evil, the Maya, the trap, the samsara, all that, this world has nothing to do with God. What has to do with God? It is that inner and the higher existence. That alone has got to do with God, not this messy material world, its illusions, its distortions, its darkness. None of this has anything to do with God. God is in the subtle higher dimension. This, not at all. So that is the philosophical narrative that is handed over across generations. The powers of this world and their actual activities, it is felt, either do not belong to God at all or are for some obscure and puzzling cause. We do not fully understand why God created this mess in the first place. For some obscure and puzzling cause, Maya. Or another, a dark contradiction of the divine truth. A dark contradiction. And this has nothing to do with God. Better get rid of it, step out of it. And on their own opposite side, the powers of the truth and their ideal activities are seen to belong to quite another plane of consciousness than that obscure, ignorant, and perverse in its impulses and forces on which the life of the earth is founded. Life of the earth is founded on this obscure, ignorant, perverse forces of nature and its impulses and forces. And this is on one side. There is another plane that is divine, and they cannot meet. These are separate things. And on their own opposite side, the powers of the truth and their ideal activities are seen to belong to quite another plane of consciousness. It seems to belong. It is seen to belong to quite another plane of consciousness than that obscure, ignorant, perverse in its impulses and forces on which the life on earth is founded. There appears at once the antinomy of a bright and pure kingdom of God and a dark and impure kingdom of the devil. So the God and the devil. On one side there is a bright kingdom of God, and the other side is the dark kingdom of the devil, the evil. So this separation has gone so deep. This narrative has gone so deep. This evil world has nothing to do with God, and we have to step out of it, get out of it as quickly as possible. That is liberation. That's how the narrative went. So there appears at once the antinomy of a bright and pure kingdom of God and a dark and impure kingdom of devil. We feel the opposition in our crawling earthly birth and life. We individually feel this opposition within us in this crawling earthly birth and life. Crawling earthly birth and life to an exalted spiritual God consciousness. We become readily convinced of the incompatibility of life's subjection to Maya with the soul's concentration in pure Brahman existence. So the soul concentrates exclusively on that divine status, because it is this higher status is incompatible with this obscurity of this world and life, which is full of ignorance, tamas, obscurity, perversions. So that separation has been brought in to religions, to yogic schools, and these are very, very common. So the antinomy of the bright and pure kingdom of God and a dark and impure kingdom of the devil. We feel the opposition of our crawling earthly birth and life to an exalted spiritual God consciousness. We become readily convinced of the incompatibility of life's subjection to Maya with the soul's concentration in pure Brahman existence. The easiest way is to turn away from all that belongs to the one and to retreat by a naked and precipitous ascent into the other. So we have to turn away. That is the traditional solution. We have to turn away from it, retreat from it by a naked and precipitous ascent. Naked. So we are not carrying with us all these baggages of our past evolution. It has to be dropped, renounced, rejected, as it is not worthy of carrying. It is all to be dropped. And precipitous ascent, a height from which the fall can be quite severe. It's a steep ascent, precipitous ascent to the other. By a naked and precipitous ascent to the other. Thus arises the attraction, and it would seem the necessity of the principle of exclusive concentration, which plays so prominent a part in the specialized schools of yoga. For by that concentration, we can arrive through an uncompromising renunciation of the world at an entire self-consecration to the one on whom we concentrate. Exclusive concentration. A concentration, as we can see in the Raja Yoga of Patanjali, dharana moves to dhyana, to samadhi, where you withdraw from this material world and its delusions and exclusively focusing on the higher consciousness, its possibilities. We get absorbed, we cut off everything of this outer world and turn exclusively by rejecting the entire world and turn exclusively into that which is of divine nature. So the tendency to develop this exclusive concentration, it comes from this need, this perception that this world and that divine world are incompatible. We have to reject, renounce this material world and turn exclusively. Therefore, the method of concentration too is of an exclusive concentration which rejects everything else and focus upon one thing that is desirable and go straight into it and drop everything else. So, thus arises the attraction, and it would seem the necessity of the principle of exclusive concentration, which plays so prominent a part in the specialized schools of yoga. For by that concentration, we can arrive through an uncompromising renunciation of the world at an entire self-consecration to the one on whom we concentrate. We consecrate ourselves entirely to the divine at a higher domain and let go of the material lower nature. It is no longer incumbent on us to compel all the lower activities to the difficult recognition of a new and higher spiritual life and train them to be agents or executive powers. So if it is that liberation spirituality that turns away and rejects this nature, it is not at all necessary to insist on these members to recognize the higher nature and pay homage to it. It is not required at all because we are rejecting the entire lower nature. So it is no longer incumbent on us to compel all our lower activities, all the lower activities, our regular routine activities of material life, to the difficult recognition of a new and higher spiritual life. So we don't have to train them to recognize this new high spiritual life and train them to be its agents and executive powers. There is no need for them to be the executive agents or powers because we are not concerned about them, their evolution, their transformation. Instead, the yoga looks at the liberation part alone, and that's why it is not integral. It is enough to kill or quiet them and keep at the most the few energies necessary on one side for the maintenance of the body and on the other for the communion with the divine. So if the goal is purely the liberation, then we just need to focus on bare minimum energy that is to be used for the maintenance of the body and energy required to access that divine higher consciousness. That's it. Everything else can be dropped. It is not required. So comes the exclusive concentration in this domain. So it is enough to kill or quiet them. Kill or quiet them. We can hear in many spiritual paths talking about manonasha, the destruction of the mind. These are all part of that rejection. It is enough to kill or quiet them and keep at most the few energies necessary on one side for the maintenance of the body and on the other for the communion with the divine. Basic. You optimize everything. You pick up your minimum energy that is required, focus them, gather them, just maintain the body and shoot upward into the higher realm at the exclusion of everything else. That is pretty much the yoga of liberation, not looking at the yoga of transformation. The very aim and conception of an integral yoga debar us from adopting the simple and strenuous high-pitched process. Simple, strenuous, high-pitched process. That is what specialized schools of yoga do in order to find the fastest, shortest path to liberation. But we are not allowed to follow that path because we are looking at integral yoga, a yoga that embraces the totality, all the way from spirit to matter. So the very aim and conception of an integral yoga debar us from adopting the simple and strenuous high-pitched process. The hope of an integral transformation forbid us to take a shortcut or to make ourselves light for the race by throwing away the impedimenta. So we are not dropping all that equipments in our trek upward into the spiritual realm. We have to carry everything with it. So there is nothing getting thrown. Our body, our life, our mind, nothing is dropped and rejected. So the hope of an integral transformation, we are looking at an integral transformation, not even a part, just the mind getting transformed. No, we are looking at mind, the vital, the physical, everything getting transformed. The hope of an integral transformation forbids us to take a shortcut, no shortcut, or to make ourselves light for the race by throwing away our impedimenta. So, these may be difficult, but we are not dropping them. We have to take them along and transform. For we have set out to conquer all ourselves and the world for God. Read carefully this line. We have set out to conquer all ourselves. We have many selves. We have to conquer all of them, all ourselves and the world for God. We are not conquering it for ourselves, we are conquering it for God. All ourselves and the world for God. We are determined to give Him our becoming as well as our being. The being and becoming. Being can liberate itself into the exalted heights of this formless spirit. But becoming, that's where the material world is, the vital world is, the mental world is. We become the mind, we become the vital, we become the physical reality. And all that, both being and becoming, is taken up to give to God. And not merely to bring the pure and naked spirit as a bare offering to a remote and secret divinity in a distant heaven. So we are not bringing that naked spirit stripped of all its bodily existence, its vital existence, mental existence, and that naked pure spirit as an offering to the highest, supreme, divine. That's not our offering. That's not what we are looking at. So not merely bringing the pure and naked spirit as a bare offering to the remote and secret divinity in a distant heaven, or abolish all we are in a holocaust to an immobile absolute. That's another highest that is sought. Holocaust, where the very individual ceases to exist in the immobile absolute, that which transcends existence beyond time and space. Into that immobile, formless, undefinable, undescribable existence, you dissolve, you cease to exist. That is the Holocaust. where you no more exist. There is no more individuals. So we can see philosophy is talking about there is no individual at all. Only that alone exists, that immobile, absolute, unknowable. So to abolish all, we are in a holocaust to an immobile absolute. That too is not what is expected in integral yoga. So let's read that powerful line from Sri Aurobindo, where this is the classical yoga and its temptations. For we have set out to conquer all ourselves and the world for God. We are determined to give Him our becoming as well as our being, and not merely to bring the pure and naked spirit as bare offering to the remote and secret divinity in a distant heaven, or abolish all, we are in a holocaust to an immobile absolute. The divine we adore is not only a remote extra cosmic reality, but a half-veiled manifestation present and near to us here in the universe. This is the key point. The divine is not just beyond the cosmos, extra cosmic, but it is here in the cosmos, in this very material existence, involved, veiled. It is there in it. It is everywhere involved. That is the picture. The divine that we adore is not only a remote extra cosmic reality, extra cosmic. It is beyond the cosmic reality, but a half-veiled manifestation present and near to us in the universe. It is near and present to us in this universe, present and near to us in the universe. Life is the field of a divine manifestation, not yet complete. That's the picture. Project Earth is incomplete. It's a work in progress. Project Humans, Homo sapiens, it's a work in progress, incomplete. It's a veil, it's an incomplete manifestation. Life is the field of a divine manifestation, not yet complete. Here, in life, on earth, in the body, ihaiva, as the Upanishad insist, we have to unveil the Godhead. The divinity is involved in this very material existence, which we have to unveil. That is the project. Here we must make its transcendent greatness, light and sweetness. Here we must make its transcendent greatness, light and sweetness real to our consciousness. Here possess and as far as may be express it. So here in this material life on this earth, that transcendent existence, its greatness, its light, its sweetness, all that are to be brought in and expressed. It's not only possess that greater possibility, but also express it here in matter, in material life, in this mentalized material life. So let me read that line. Life is the field of a divine manifestation, not yet complete. Here, in life, on earth, in the body, ihaiva, as the Upanishads insist, we have to unveil the Godhead. Here we must make its transcendent greatness, light and sweetness real to our consciousness. Here possess and, as far as may be, express it. Let then we must accept in our yoga in order utterly to transmute it. We are forbidden to shrink from the difficulties that this acceptance may add to our struggle. Life then we must accept in our yoga, life in its complexity, in its rich diversity, with all its demands. This we must accept. Life then we must accept in our yoga. In order utterly to transmute it, we are not merely accepting it, we are accepting it in order to transmute it. We are forbidden to shrink from the difficulties that this acceptance may add to our struggle. Accepting life and its complexity adds a great deal of difficulty. And we are not allowed to shrink from that difficulty. The battleground earth, Kurukshetra, that's where the yoga is meant to unfold. The integral yoga is meant to unfold, and we are accepting the struggle of life in order to transmute it, transform it. For once our minds are reasonably fixed in the central vision, and our wills, not just one will, multiple wills, because we are composed of multiple parts of the being, each part having its own will. So, and our wills are on the whole converted to the single pursuit. Life becomes our helper. That's eternal. That's the flip, other side. What appeared to be difficult challenge and struggle down the line become a helper. For once our minds are reasonably fixed in the central vision, our minds are reasonably fixed on the central vision, and our wills are on the whole converted to the single pursuit, the mind and will having its vision and a single-minded pursuit, then life becomes our helper. Intent, vigilant, integrally conscious. Intent, vigilant, integrally conscious. We can take every detail of its forms and every incident of its movements as food for the sacrificial fire within us. All the circumstances of life, all the incidents of life, all the challenges of life, all the difficulties of life, these become the fodder. These become the sacrificial materials. These become the oblations for the fire within us. That's the means through which we progress. We thrive in life and its challenging situations. Every difficulty becomes the opportunity for a breakthrough into a greater freedom, a greater creative possibility. So, intent, vigilant, integrally conscious. We can take every detail of its forms and every incident of its movements as food for the sacrificial fire within us. Food, the challenges of life, the difficulties of life is the very food for the sacrificial fire within us. Victorious in the struggle, we can compel Earth herself to be an aid. Earth herself, not just a little body. Aurobindo is referring to the earth as a whole. Victorious in the struggle, we can compel Earth herself to be an aid towards our perfection and can enrich our realization with the booty torn from the powers that oppose us. Powers with capital P. There are tremendous powers that oppose. Powers of universal nature, evolutionary past that is already settled and running in certain grooves. And if we are to take out our energies from it and to ascend to a higher possibility, we have to deal with them. These powers would oppose, and there is corresponding battle at an individual inner space and as well as in the collective life of humanity. There is this transformational struggle. But every step, every victory, everything that we win, the booty that is torn from the powers that oppose us. The booty that is torn from the powers. Because these powers hide the light, the force. And whenever we conquer one terrain, like in the games, when you level up, you gain new powers. Integral yoga is the ultimate real-time, interactive, cosmic game that you can play, where as you level up, new powers enter. The booty torn from the powers that oppose us. So that's the type of game we are into. Victorious in the struggle, we can compel Earth herself to be an aid towards our perfection and can enrich our realization with the booty torn from the powers that oppose us. Quite an amazing picture. On one hand, there is incredible difficulties brought in by the complexity of human nature, not only individual nature, but collective nature and the evolutionary past, which the specialized schools of yoga decided this has nothing to do with the spirit. It is evil, it's dark, it's obscure. It has to be rejected completely. And what is real is only that which is the divine, the higher consciousness. And the method proposed by various schools of yoga thus focuses on an exclusive concentration of picking up one corner of the possibility that is nearest to you, easiest to you, and reject everything else and focus exclusively your energy to shoot upward into that sublime divine existence. And you're done. Whereas integral yoga says, no, that is not allowed. We are into an integral path where the project Earth, project Homo sapiens is incomplete. The divine's project is unfolding. The divine is involved here in this material existence, which we have to unveil. And that's the work, for which we need to ascend into that higher realms of possibility and bring that light and force into matter, into bodily existence, into our life currents, into our mental operations, and transform and transmute them. And in that process, every victory won brings us greater capacities, greater powers. And very earth itself become our aid and support. Even though initially it appears to be a tremendous struggle, not only at an individual, but as a collective and universal level. And yet, the beauty of this integral yoga is every victory brings a greater power and a greater possibility, so that we become participants in the divine's project of manifesting divinity in this life on earth. So with that, we end our today's session. And please do share your insights, your learnings, which can be of interest to other people, observations, all that. Make it interesting for everyone else so that people can read what you are picking up from this journey together, and can be made a great use, or even the way you are exploring this journey, whatsoever we would like to share, make it rich and interesting. Just like I'm sharing my journey. To me, reading this is reinforcing my journey, my sadhana, and I'm greatly benefiting by doing this. Thank you for being with me in this journey and sharing your insights, your journey. Let's go together. Thank you.